It's the interview series. The interview series. It's the interview series. The interview series. It's the interview series. The interview series.
Welcome to the interview series, where I am so excited to introduce this next guest. Before I do have to kind of throw a little piece in here, and we have interviewed 8 different people so far, from commercial real estate lenders to regular lenders, brokers, financial planners, CPAs, and whatnot, all for your liking, all for resources for you to make sure that you have something or someone to go to when in that time of need. So this episode is really no different, but I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that I am a real estate agent. So and this podcast is for you, but don't hesitate to reach out to me for any real estate needs. So without further ado, I'm really excited to introduce Bridget Mackay. Welcome to the interview series.
Thank you, Jeff.
Yeah, this is your first podcast?
This is my first podcast.
It's an honor. It's an honor.
Yes.
And before we kind of get into who you are and what you do, Bridget is. I look at her as an estate attorney, but she is an attorney. She does multiple different things. And the reason why I brought her on, or the reason why let me talk to you. The reason why I brought you on is because you were really helpful with me, and you know this already, but I want to make sure I give you your flowers while we're together here on the podcast. Is I was going through a really tough time with my mom. She had dementia at the time. I didn't know anything. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know who to call. And I found you, and sitting with you in that first meeting was really huge for me. And it was like a first step to taking the right necessary actions to helping my mom, and then giving me peace of mind, because there's so much stuff from where to put her, whether it's in a home, whether it's in where the money's going to come from, how to utilize her money. If she passes, where is her money going in the right spots? Do I have a trust? What is a trust? Is a will sufficient enough? All these things people don't talk about. And full transparency, my mom passed away when she was 74. So I think we talked when she was 69 or 70, maybe a little bit earlier. So that's young.
That's very young.
Very young. And so anyways, that's why you're here. I think it's really important to kind of discuss and talk about, or just making sure people have a resource. Because I wish I had known about things a lot earlier before they happened, right? And so I think just being proactive as opposed to reactive is only going to benefit those families that are going through the unfortunate the unfortunate things that are most likely going to happen, right? So we're kind of getting into the weeds of what you do, but I mean, kind of tell us a little bit about yourself, Bridget. Maybe I'll learn a thing or two, but just tell me about yourself. Obviously, you're an attorney, but just give us a little bit of background, family history. Where you practice, how you got where you are today.
Okay. I will try and be as concise as I can.
Let it out, Bridget. Let it out.
I became an attorney. This was not my first area of practice. I started as a deputy district attorney, so I was a criminal prosecutor for 10 years. I started in Solano County in Vallejo, the Vallejo courthouse. I was there for 3 years or so, and then moved to Sonoma County. The pay was better, and there were 2 girlfriends that I went to law school with who were DAs in Sonoma, so they were in the Santa Rosa office. So I applied, got into that office, and did it for another 7 years. Most of my career as a criminal prosecutor, trial attorney, was in the area of domestic violence. But I went through the other areas. I was on the drug unit for a minute. I was in the, just felonies in the courtroom, like every felony that didn't fall into a specialty. I did a little stint on the auto theft task force, and then ultimately the homicide team. And so that is where my life kind of changed. Really enjoying that work. Trial work was like someone asked me about it the other day, and it's not like civil trial work for sure, and it's just really fun if it's something you like to do, which sounds horrible because you're dealing with someone who's been murdered, and
I can imagine.
consequences for the defendant, all of that stuff. And I was really enjoying it. I was married at that point. My husband was a police officer with Vallejo. I had just had a baby. I had her in 2003 and had 6 months off with her, and then went back full time that next January and back into the homicide team. And he worked swing shifts, so he was out of the house by 2 p.m, not really back until like 3 a.m. So pretty much all the childcare fell on me. And I was dropping her off at daycare at 7:30 in the morning, as a baby, picking her up at 5 if I could make it back at that time. The lady who provided childcare with me was really not a fan of me. I felt awful. I was always late. It was awful. But that didn't make me change my mind. What really was the kicker was, we were on an on-call kind of situation where if something was happening, we had to, advise the whatever agency's dealing with a homicide about the search warrant or the arrest warrant.
Of course.
So I got a call from the sheriff's office, and they were like, yeah, we have this homicide, and, we know who it is. So we have an arrest. Is that me? That's embarrassing. Should I go get it?
Just keep going. It'll go away.
Okay.
Yeah, it's okay.
Long story short, I had to wake my 6 months old, she's maybe 8 months at that point, up, get her in the car because we lived in Petaluma, drive up to Santa Rosa, the sheriff's office, put her in a baby Bjorn or whatever, carry her in, entertain her. She was up. She was fussy. I'm looking at these warrants. I mean, it was just chaotic. It took me like 2 hours. I get back to the house at 5 a.m. I got to turn around by 7:30 and get her into the I mean, it was just crazy. And there was a moment where I was like, okay, this is insane. This is just insane. So it took me another 18 months, though, to kind of extract myself from that position because I had trials to do. And then even after that, I finished my last murder trial in like May of 2005, and I was back that summer for the sentencings. And so anyways, I wrapped that up, and I needed to find a career that didn't require 830 court, didn't require any litigation, or very little, if any, and something that would be flexible to help me raise my family. And so I found estate planning. It was something that, I had some familiarity with. My grandparents had a trust, and so that, those words were bandied about in my, childhood or in my family. And also in law school enjoyed wills, trusts, the subject. So it's kind of a Thelma and Louise move. I just left the DA's office and opened up this practice on my dining room table. And here we are 18 years later, and I have, we're dedicated to estate planning and elder law. I have another attorney, an associate attorney, and 6 staff. We've helped thousands of families, and that's where I'm at.
And I'm going to sound very repetitive here. I'm one of those 1,000, and I really, really, really want to thank you. Seriously.
Yeah.
I know why you do what you do, but I don't know how often you get thank yous. And maybe you get enough, but I don't think you do. So thank you. Because when you brought up the word or term elder law, I remember in my research trying to find an elder law attorney, and that's how I found you. It wasn't a referral or anything, and so
it was a Google search.
It was a Google search.
Well, that marketing was working.
Marketing's working, yeah. And so again, elder law attorney, estate planning. Those were things where my mom was older, right, and she couldn't do things for herself, and I didn't know where to turn. So. I remember that meeting because you were in my mind, so young to be dealing with this. And then my mind too.
And thereby your mother was young. Mm-hmm. Incapacity, I can tell you, I've been doing this a long time, and I've been doing elder law a long time, helping people qualify for Medi-Cal benefits, for care, things like that. And I can confidently say right now, the most challenging time in someone's life when they're dealing with these issues is an incapacity. And conversely, I think in life, we look at this kind of planning like, oh, I need a will, or, oh, I need a trust. What's the better one? Like, when I die, ... I want this to happen or that to happen. And we're all going to die, right? Yeah. So that's a pretty good thing to start thinking about, because it will happen. It's not if, it's a when. However, people procrastinate because as humans, we're, infinitely hopeful that it's not going to happen, and it's not going to happen anytime soon. So I got time, right? The problem is incapacities are, those aren't inevitable, but when they do happen, and they're happening more frequently, I am finding, gosh, they're hard to navigate for a spouse or an adult child, because you just have no idea what to do from the very beginning. Am I paying bills? Am I not paying bills? Does she stay in her house? Does she not? Can she stay in her house? To what degree can she stay in her house? Do I have to do her grocery shopping for her? Am I going to a doctor's appointments now?
The costs.
And the costs were
I think that was my biggest thing. That for me was the biggest.
Mm-hmm.
How am I going to do this?
Right.
I don't necessarily want to put her in this situation, and even to get her in this situation that would be at least less costly.
Mm-hmm.
There's a wait. So I don't even have that option right now. So where do I put her that's safe? I guess safe is a big key, right? Because she's she can't.
She's
think.
alone.
She's alone. She can't think. So, anyways, but yeah, the cost. When I found out, we don't necessarily have to go into all that, but I will. I'm looking at places from $5,000 to $7,000 a month, upwards to $10,000 to $12,000 a month out of pocket. And so,
I came in as like the fairy godmother, like, yes, I can get rid of that. But the double-edged sword is she's in a skilled nursing facility, sharing a room with at least one, if not two other people. You're not paying that $12,000 a month anymore. You're paying much, much less. But is that where you want her? So there was this, oh my God, this sort of soulful examination of this horrible choice.
Exactly. And there are options, right? When you think about it, okay, do I want to put her in? It's just, even the basic places that aren't the skilled nursing facilities were, $5,000. That was the lowest I found. I think I saw something that was like $3,500, but it was
sketchy board and care.
It's tough. And so anyways, again, I was reactive in that life circumstance, right? So if I had been proactive, or even more informative, more educated, whether it's long-term care insurance that I knew about 15 years ago or however long ago.
Got her signed up for it.
That might have been different. And I think, this is...
But how old were you 15 years prior to that?
Prior to that I was...
Were you 16?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know.
Thank you for that, but close. But
Mom, get some long-term care insurance.
I think
coming from your 16-year-old. I
think though that yes, I wish I would have been a little bit more. I guess I wish I know what I what I'm trying to say.
I do.
I wish I knew then what I know now. But then it also goes back to my mom's education, right? Had she known what I know now, she could have set herself up for that. And I think this is kind of why I have you here.
Right.
And if only one person watches one of the shorts, one of the videos, that could have been me. And I could have been more prepared.
Yeah.
Because I was going through divorce at that time.
Right.
Which is also tough, right? And so then when you're watching your mom go through this and have to make really tough decisions, because a lot of divorces have to do with, a majority of the time, it depends on who you are, but you're forking out some money for that, right? To get that all settled, your new lifestyle, that whole thing, making sure your kid's straight, simultaneously trying to figure out where you're going to come up with $7,000 a month
for your mother,
for your mom. That is a stress that I don't wish on anyone, and it was tough for me. But when you're backed into a corner, you tend to try to figure it out, right?
And you did.
And I did. Thanks to you, though. So I guess my first question to you, or question I have for you, is for those that aren't in a state that I was in as it relates to adversity and my mom, essentially passing. When their parents are healthy, what would you advise those that don't really necessarily need to meet with you? What would you tell those people that are at my age, 39 now, and their parents are seemingly healthy, but they're in their 65s and 70s or whatnot? And, is there any advice that you would give or that you can give to those that, I guess I'm asking, what do you see from that clientele that walks in that is maybe planning it? Oh, I wish I would have done this. What can you tell them? Or what have you heard?
Yeah. So, there's a lot there to unpack. I mean, in the ideal run-up to this journey of aging, which is where I catch people, not always though, young families, I do think there's a piece of planning for young families that need to happen. If you have children, you own a house, at a minimum, you want a will, right? Because in the will, you can name a physical guardian for your child if something were to happen to you. Young families that come to us, we even take it a step deeper and, there's documents for temporary guardianship because a lot of people don't know this, but if you got in a car accident and, both parents passed away, that child, whether they're at school, daycare, whatever, will be contacted by law enforcement. Then Child Protective Services would step in and take custody of those children until they can vet a proper person to place them in a home for care, until they can go through what's called a guardianship, which is a court process that confers legal rights as a guardian, so health decisions, financial decisions for that child until they reach 18. So that little piece of time that's post-accident CPS engagement until the court appoints someone permanent, you take care of that too, a short-term guardianship. So a parent can say, this is who you should contact. You give that form to the school, you give it to the daycare, and you want to reduce the amount of trauma that child's going to experience because of losing parents and then getting into some kind of system that, it's terrifying. I think it should be terrifying for every parent of a minor child.
For sure.
So at a very minimum, that needs to happen for people. Just going through life, everybody should have, if you're an adult, you should have a healthcare directive and a power of attorney, whether that's something you download off of the internet or whatever, and have your person who's going to step in. I just talked to someone today whose brother passed away at age 34 with nothing, and he's coming from the East Coast. The parents are Portuguese. I mean, it's the guy's estate's mostly debt, but still, it's not about what you have, and I think that's the assumption people make financially, right? People think, oh, I don't need to do this planning until I own a house or until I have a certain amount in my bank account or investment or whatever, when in truth, it's actual kind of life kit planning. Because circumstances happen and we have no idea what they're going to be and when they're going to happen. Like you illustrated, like not only was I dealing with my mom who was had dementia, but also I was in a divorce. So we can't predict when this is happening and what the layers are going to be to that life situation. So it's really a mindset rather than a spreadsheet. An Excel spreadsheet of what you have before you make the decision. If you have kids, the most loving thing you can do is get as much in place as possible when they're minors. Because anything you do have, you want things to go smooth. Ultimately, everybody wants things to go smooth. That's the bottom line. And you can do these things to make sure it goes smooth for those people you love the most. That's my message.
Yeah. That's a great message. And as you're talking, I'm thinking back to, did my mom have everything in place to make it go smoother for me? And excuse me. I mean, for the most part,
she tried.
She tried the best she could with the knowledge that she had, and I'm happy for that because if she did not have the healthcare directive, Kaiser wouldn't have talked to me at all.
100%.
And I didn't know that till I needed it, and so I'm glad she did have that, right? And she had the will. I believe she had a trust, I think, for the house.
She had a power of attorney, I think.
Power of attorney.
She had the power of
Correct,
attorney,
correct.
and that's how you sold the house. That's how you she put you on her bank account.
Yep, exactly.
So I remember saying to you, this was kind of a little bit of a rubber band, paperclip kind of plan that worked.
Yeah.
And we worked it.
Yeah, 100%. And it was a little reactive, though, for the bank account adding. And that might be the case with certain individuals, because who's going to put their mid-30-year-old child on their bank account if they're healthy, right?
They wouldn't.
They wouldn't. But right when my mom was getting sick, when I had to force retire her, I had to, she had to give up her driver's license, and then a month later she had to move in with me and just give up everything she knew.
You were like, put me on your bank account.
Yeah, and right before she started to slip, because once you switch someone from, a setting that she's known for the last 40 years to a different city, so Oakland, where she was, to Santa Rosa, this is to change, so they kind of slip a little bit more,
100%
mentally, because they're not around familiar surroundings, right? So, anyways, it was just it's timing is everything, and just I got a little lucky on that, because if I wasn't on that, and there was a process to get onto her. It was easy, like the IRA or whatever, the investment account. It wasn't as easy as just adding your name. You had to
give them the POA.
Yeah, POA,
it's in her name.
and I had to make sure it's printed out and faxed in, and that was a process. It's not just it
magically happens, like the Lucky Charms leprechaun.
Exactly. So, anyways, being proactive, I think, is key. Well, go ahead.
Yeah, and I would on that. You made it work, but my advice to people would be is don't wait, right? Don't wait for that.
Do not wait. I mean, it's stressful.
Very stressful.
Because in this situation, she happened to have dementia. In other situations, it could have been a faster plummet.
Like a stroke?
A stroke, cancer, all these different things. And she ended up passing away from cancer. I didn't even know that she was going to have that when I was doing all this. It's another thing, right? Like I'm thinking she's going to pass away from dementia, however that long it takes, 5 months, 5 years, 20 years. Like? What does that look like? How do I spread this money out? And then she ends up, going into doctor appointment, a little lump on her lung, and then, cancer a year. She's gone. And so again, that's just another example of you can't predict these things.
No,
right?
And it brings in all those things like cancer. So what does her healthcare agent documents say? Does she get treatment for it? Does she not get, that's your call, right? What were those conversations you had with her? Because I'll tell you, you're not going to write all that down in the healthcare directive. People want to, but I'm like, you're not going to be able to predict what you have. So, your spoonful of ice chunks is not going to work. You just trust someone.
You trust someone.
You have them on your document, and they make those decisions based on what you've told them, your religious beliefs, all of it.
Yeah, and I think I think it was glad that we had a good relationship. So
you knew her.
I kind of felt like I knew, but when the oncologist reaches out to me and calls me after the biopsy and tells me that it is cancer for sure, and I was like, and he gave me his what essentially what it was, where I asked him, how long does she have? Statistically, he was like, well, if she does chemo, then probably a year. If she doesn't, then 6 months.
Do you put a dementia person through chemo?
Exactly.
Do they even know what they're doing?
And that's where I didn't. And he was like, we advise not to, because she's not going to be able to communicate to us anything. And it's going to be a poor quality of life the rest of the time. And so I had to weigh that. I mean, I heard him say it, but then I'm like, okay, well, do I want to give my mom more time? What does that time look like? I couldn't talk to her about it. And then, so essentially,
I opted. Very alone place.
Oh, yes, the worst. It was really bad, but so I opted not to get her the chemo, because I wanted to have a nice, a better quality of life, however long that looked. And he said 6 months. She lasted a year, so more power to her for fighting through. But yeah, it was interesting too, not to make this all about cancer, but I didn't know or think that she was, I almost didn't believe him, even 10 months in. It was a month 11, I was like, oh, okay, something's up. Because she was up dancing, smiling, talking crap, like literally curse crap in it, I won't put it, shit, damn, all these different things. And so, but in month 11, I visited her and I could just tell it was a drop. And so, anyways, you never know when that drop's going to happen. I can only imagine if that happened a month in and I didn't know it was coming. You know what I mean? Because she just happened to go and get some type of whatever. I forgot why she went to the doctor. She had pneumonia, so they did like a scan. Had she not had pneumonia, we wouldn't have got her scan, and she would end up dying probably the same amount of time without what I was knowing. Because right, like I didn't know she had cancer until, or like physically, she couldn't express it. She couldn't express. Even when I visited her within that year, I'm telling you, month 10, she was up and at 'em, running to me, and then month 11, that's when you just saw this change. And so things happen for a reason. You can't plan that they're going to have pneumonia. That will give you more time to figure things out, and which is why life is going to happen. This isn't a sexy subject that people want to talk about or probably listen to. So we're probably just one viewer for the one viewer out there.
But people connect to it.
Yeah.
People connect to it because it's happening. It's happening to someone they know. And getting back to preparing, like, don't wait. Don't rely on a power of attorney or being on a bank account or, put it in place now, because this is, like you said, it's not just reactionary. There's a point in time where you can't do anything. You cannot. My dad had a stroke, so it was quick. I mean, it was fast. Yeah. And so those folks who are dealing with a stroke or a fast something, aneurysm, whatever it is, it's too late. If you don't have something there, it's 100% too late. And that is an ugly, horrible place to be, because you're in court. It opens up to fighting, more stress, more chaos, more cost, crazy amount of cost. Anytime you go to court, cost is crazy. Yeah. So what should you do? So we talked about young families. Like young families, if you have young children and you own property, get a trust. Set up all that guardian stuff for them. Short-term, temporary guardianship paperwork, plus naming physical people to take care of them in your will, as well as the financial piece, which would play out in your trust. If you're retirement age, your kids are grown and out, have a trust. You've accumulated assets. Talk to an estate planning attorney, someone who actually works in this area all the time. Don't go to your real estate attorney or your business attorney who's like, yeah, I can do a trust for you, no problem. They're not going to understand. They may understand the whole idea of putting a trust together, but they're not going to understand the circumstances of aging, the elder law issues, the different tools you need in a trust to address that stuff. And then it's really important. I know in our office, we review every 3 years. So, free appointment. We invite our clients in every 3 years and sit them down and just connect, figure out things are still right, because these aren't things you put in place and then shove in your security, safe deposit box. And then when you quote unquote need them, they show up. Because, your life changes, circumstances change, people name different people, distributions change. Like if you have a young child, you're going to have it go out at certain ages, but now this child's aged and they're drug addicts or something. You don't do anything about it. It's, not good. Yeah. Or they're married to someone that you absolutely are not a fan of. And, you don't want, they don't know that if they inherit something, it's their separate property, even they're married, right? An adult child. And then a parent dies and they inherit, a chunk of change. They commingle it with that spouse, like, I'm going to put it in joint tenancy because they don't have a plan themselves or something. They want to make sure things are good then. 5 years later, it turns sour. Yeah. Guess what? Half of all you've earned goes off with your daughter's ex-husband that you never even really liked, and there's no way to claw that back if you don't plan. And it's crazy to think that a parent plans for a child's divorce through an inheritance, but it happens. It's a through line that you don't expect to be there, but it is.
That is something that I'm walking away with that I was not thinking about walking in here. So,
right?
Seriously, that's an angle that I mean, it's simple, but it's not easy to think through. I mean, you wouldn't just, I guess easy, but not simple, right? Or
Right.
whether
Well,
the
I
saying
don't
is,
think it's
just,
out there. People don't think
I'm
about
not
it on
thinking
that
about my
level.
daughter choosing the wrong person, and then to that level of
Which underscores, like, don't go to your business attorney for your estate plan.
yeah, it's true.
You know, go to someone who's seeing this stuff
Mm-hmm.
day after day and putting that stuff in the trust itself. And incapacity, again, is, you know, it's a tricky time. Like you said, you weren't sure, you know, had her health held up since her dementia onset was, what, 70, late 60s?
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's a possibility that she lived another 30 years physically. So.
And that was scary.
Mm-hmm. The thought of it.
The thought of the longevity of that money and not knowing where it's coming from, or the cost. And obviously you want your parent around, but then you're thinking about $5,000 to $7,000 a month for the next 30 years.
Mm-hmm. And we had that very real, difficult conversation where I said, there may come a day where she does end up in a skilled nursing facility where you do not want her to be, but it would preserve assets for you and your daughter, and that's what she would want.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's a crazy concept, but it's true. Yeah. If you really think of it as a parent, like, I don't want all I built going towards my care because I'm now incapacitated.
Yeah.
And at my death, my children, my grandchildren don't get the things I wanted for them.
Yeah.
And that's why I worked hard and saved this whole time. So what are things to stave off the cost? Well, first, a very basic thing is to get that well-drafted trust, support documents, which are the power of attorney, healthcare directive. Further, make sure it's all funded, you know, so the deed to the house says, you know, Jeff Fuller, trustee of the Jeff Fuller Trust. You know, just everything's connected. That reduces the chaos for the successor to find things and transfer things. But paying for it, yeah, I would recommend looking into long-term care for sure. All plans are different. The beauty of it is this, you know, we have this baby boomer generation, this, you know, silver tsunami, it's being called in my periodicals, you know, magazines I read, and it's true. They're kind of changing the outlook of how we age. And so therefore the insurance industry is like turning out new products that are, you know, and you can have someone on your podcast probably that could go deeper into this, but, you know, life insurance policies that have a long-term care rider, things that you don't have to qualify health-wise. You could just shove $50,000 in there, and over 20 years, it's going to be $400,000 that'll go towards care, you know, that kind of thing. But you have to do it at the right age, right? So at 70, you're not going to be qualifying, or if you are, your premiums are going to be so high that it's just not going to be affordable. The other thing is invest well. You know, invest now, invest well, and don't rely on Medi-Cal or other resources to cover a long-term care need. How much should I plan for a long-term care need? I don't know. You know, and any financial planner out there who tells you this is how much, they're full of, you know what, because, you know, the costs and the length of time are all unpredictable. The only thing I could say is more is better.
Yeah. Yeah. I had a list of questions. I'm just like going to put these down.
You know,
I've got more in my head that I'm like, as you're talking, not to cut you off before I forget the question. So I'm thinking, you know, prior to my mom's situation, you know, I'm this, what I think is a kid, even though I'm in my 30s. I don't know anything. And I'm calling my mom, or not picking up my mom's phone call because I'm busy. She's relatively healthy. She's calling me once a week, like she did religiously every Sunday. And I mean religiously. But she would call me all the time, and I'm just living life. I'm married at the time, playing with my daughter. Everything's great, working out, just living, going traveling. I guess it's a kind of a two-part question, so bear with me. Probably really long. What advice would you give that person that has an aging parent that looks seemingly healthy, What advice would you give that me before my mom?
Yes.
Not knowing it's coming up, because I mean that's a majority of the people out there. Because the majority of my friends, while I was going through what I was going through, even till this day, they have parents. They're calling. They'll hang up. They won't even. They're not thinking about their parents ending.
Yeah.
Like I wasn't.
Yeah.
Right. And then on the flip side, that call that my mom was making, right? She didn't know the end was coming.
No.
And she wasn't. I mean, she had things set aside and prepared, but we weren't having discussions. So, two very different sides of the coin. If whether you're talking to me before it happened to my mom, and people like that, or you're talking to my mom before it happens to her, do you have any? I know you've talked to both. What advice, suggestions, experiences do you have with those sides before it happens? Because that's the majority of the people out there, which is why they're ignoring it and they're not worrying about it.
Oh, yeah, totally. Yeah. Who wants to talk about death, dying, incapacity, all those like horrible things? When we do our, our webinars, our educational webinars, we congratulate everybody for being there because like, we're going to dig into some nasty stuff you don't want to talk about.
Yeah.
And I'm so congratulatory to you for just sitting there and listening. But to that point, these plans live in conversations. They don't live in the documents. You're going to make decisions in the documents, choose people for roles, distributions when I'm dead, all that stuff. But the meat of making this smooth and making it work for your family live in those very conversations you're talking about. So with every plan, I encourage the person doing the plan to set up a family meeting, and that's included in the fee and stuff for us. And I've had them on Zoom at 7:00 at night because the kids who are mid-30s are working or busy or lives, and it just takes an hour. And my goal is that's the seed to the conversation. We're going to create some transparency here because transparency needs to happen. Older generations wanted to keep their will private because they thought their kids were greedy or, you need to change that attitude. From your mom's point of view, those folks need to share and be transparent about what they're doing and start those conversations with their kids. So that's what I would be achieving on your mom's side from those calls. On the kids' side, this is not something we want to think about, do, handle, be a part of. And so we reluctantly receive that information. In the family meetings I have had, the 30-something kids who are the successor trustees or even just beneficiaries are sitting there like, we don't want to talk about this, Mom. Like, why are we here? They're very resistant to the, call. But, 20 minutes into it, they're asking like, well, what if this happens? When do I, because there's these very minutia questions that are really important. Like, when do I step in? I noticed this happening with my mom. When do I step in? And then they get humorous about it. Like, oh yeah, the first time you buy too many carrots and I see it in the refrigerator, I'm pulling your license, or whatever. Yeah. But even in humor and even in reluctance and seriousness, it's out there, right? So it's on the table and those conversations are starting. And it's a starting piece by having that plan in place. Like, that's what I tell the parents, like, hey, just call them up and say, hey, we finished our plan. Our attorneys offered to do a family meeting. When are you guys free? It's only going to take an hour. So that's where it starts. And that's, solid documents are important. But then to layer onto that is, what are the conversations I'm going to have with them? You can't have that conversation with your daughter. She's too young right now. Yeah. But when she gets older and she can, that's great. But maybe you talk to the people who are the potential guardians, right? Even if that's your ex-spouse. Just saying to the ex-spouse, look, I've got to trust my stuff is taken care of for her, and this is the person who's handling the finances. That's all you have to say to them. You don't have to go deep. Yeah,
of course.
You don't want to. But so that's the advice I would give is if you're someone who's planning an estate, be willing to talk about it with your kids. Be willing to share the documents if they want, particularly if you're naming them as the healthcare agent or as the successor trustee. Look for a law firm that's going to provide that for you. Like, will you have a conversation with my kids, with me, around this plan? We encourage that a lot because it also sets us up or sets a resource up for the kid when something happens. Like you Googled and found me. But my goal with all my clients is that they'll just call me and we'll have, okay, yeah, I know you now because we've had that family meeting, or they've come to one of our educational seminars like trustee school or something like that. So they already know Miranda or I, and they're already ready to receive the information. It makes it just so much smoother.
Yeah.
Because it's right there.
Yeah.
And they don't have to look around. I don't know what else to say about the 30-something crowd who, for those 30-somethings who want to talk to their parents, I've had that too, where they have parents who are kind of shut off, or they've tried to ask, this is happening to my friend Jeff. It was tough for him. Do you guys have something in place?
Yeah.
And parents are like,
Yeah. Yeah.
And I just say appeal to the emotions, which is, and that any parent has to a child. Like, I don't want to be in a tough situation when this goes down because you haven't done the planning or the preparing.
Yeah.
So do this for me. I'm not greedy. I'm not getting all up in your business. I just don't want to be blindsided by this scenario when I might have my own life scenarios going on.
Yeah. Yeah. I get that. So there's a lot, right? So I think if you're just, anybody that's out there, you're thinking durable power of attorney, will, trust. I'm missing something.
Healthcare directive.
Advanced healthcare directive.
Yeah.
That's 4, if I'm not mistaken. If not,
yeah.
So will, trust, durable power of attorney, advanced healthcare directive. I'm sure there's more stuff. And so, like, I think it's just one of those things that, like, people feel overwhelmed about, and they're just like, ugh, I got my will, I'm good.
It's a beast. Yeah.
It's a beast. And so I guess I'm just trying to figure out how to help those, because I guess I'm thinking the clients that I serve, right, are couples.
Yeah.
And it's not my job to get them an advanced healthcare director or anything like that, but they're at that stage where, okay, I just helped you, purchase or sell the largest asset that you'll ever have.
And it doesn't feel like it because you owe the bank. And
yeah. However, I mean, that's kind of why I'm doing the podcast and trying to build the relationships through these interviews, is because whether you're a financial advisor, a CPA, an attorney, estate attorney, an elder law attorney, I mean, we're all in the same boat of helping people.
Right.
And you're not going to sell them a house.
No.
Right. And I'm not going to give them I'm not going to kind of walk them through the process of a will, a trust, a durable power of attorney, and an advanced health care directive. But if I put myself in their shoes, we're all a team to help her, and they at some point will need to touch base with each person that's there to help them. But it's just so overwhelming.
It is.
Right?
It is. So how do you get into action is the question.
How do I get them into understanding the importance of coming to see you without trying to push it on them? Man, it's not that's not what that is. I wish I did it a little earlier. And so I guess I'm just, you said something earlier about like a trustee school. Do you have like courses outside of the individual meeting? Talk to me more about that.
Yeah. So for us, we don't meet with anybody until they've had some basic education that we provide.
Okay.
Right. And from there, they can make a choice to make an appointment. So the flagship education thing is either a webinar. Sometimes we do live seminars. Yeah. They're about an hour and a half. They're just the planning seminar. So they do a deep dive in what we're talking about today. Like, why do I need a will? Why do I need a trust? Is a trust better than a will? Or is a will enough? Long-term care, expenses, all of that stuff is in that webinar. At the end, we open it up for questions. So if there's any specific questions. Also in that webinar is like, how long does it take for me to put this in place? How much does it cost? What am I to expect from this process. So that's all in there. So they have that information. And then at the end of it, you get a free 1-hour consult with Miranda or I. And there we dig into your specific concerns, right? And what's most important to you. And in those meetings, I don't go over explaining like, oh, will's better than a trust, and this is why you need it. You've already gotten that education. Then they can really ask the real questions like, is the timing right? Should I do this? Or is a will enough for my situation, or a trust, or will I need a trust for my situation? And then we can answer all those questions. And then at the very end of that, it's like, do you want to get it now or not? And then they move on, or they get it. And in that way, they know what they're choosing and how they're going about it, and what do we as attorneys that do it offer them. Because there's plenty of there's plenty of attorneys out there they can get it from too, which I would suggest checking it out, right? Yeah. And so the action plan is just forewarned is forearmed. Start looking, get the education. So then trustee school is something, once you become a client of ours, we have ongoing education programming. So trustee school we do 4 times a year, where the clients sometimes are on that webinar, and that's usually a webinar because they want their kids to be there, and it's usually in the evening. So, we'll have 70, 80 people on our trustee school, and it's the clients or their named successor trustees, where we really kind of dig into like, hey, here's your job.
Wow, that's cool.
Here's your responsibilities. Here are the things to look for. We answer that question of like, when do I step in at incapacity? What kind of things are happening that would require me to do something? Because it is actually a responsibility once you're named. You can't just like wait for the incapacitated person to go, hey, I'm ready now. Yeah. Because it just doesn't go down that way. Yeah. And so that's what that covers. We have one on Medi-Cal or long-term care planning. We have one on healthcare directives, because people get healthcare directives, but very rarely do we understand when we're called into action, how that goes down. Yeah, yeah.
Every situation is probably different too, right?
Right. Yeah, it is. Yeah. So that stuff we provide to clients is just kind of ongoing education.
Got it. Are those recorded sessions? Are they?
Yeah, so we'll record trustee school, and if someone can't make it, we'll send the recording out to them.
Got it. And those obviously for clients, right? So clients okay.
Yeah.
Maybe a dumb question. How do you become a client? I mean, do you just come in and say, hey, I'm initial meeting and now I'm a client, or first consultation? Like, what do you have to have a reason? Maybe you're all healthy and you're running Ironmans, and does that disqualify you from being a client?
No.
How can one become a client at the law offices?
Because you want it now, huh? You want it now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So
how do you become part of the tribe?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you get a trust on with us.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that's the intro.
Got it.
Although you may be a client because you've worked with us and you hired us for the work with your mom. I don't know how our emails go out, who gets invited to what. But
I get a ton of emails. I haven't been anything yet just because, that was I feel like I got a lot out of that lesson just through
life lesson
through all that stuff. So
School of Hard Knocks.
Yeah, but I'm starting to think through things now. My daughter, do I have things in play? And I know I do, but yeah, so.
Yeah, you probably have things in play, and you are not unusual. Like, families your age aren't necessarily getting trust. I'm always pleasantly surprised when they do. Yeah. Really, the bulk of clientele for me are more 50s to 90s, Yeah. So, yeah, definitely when you get into your 50s, you should be getting your plan together. Something short of that, young families, maybe a will is enough. Yeah. And maybe that's something you do on LegalZoom or whatever, but we also do wills. So if you came in and will was where you were at financially, affordability wise, and all of that stuff, then it's something.
Yeah. Those 50 and 90-year-olds, any I hate to call it stories, but anything that they would that they wish they would do differently?
Any tales of caution?
Tales of caution that you've learned from any of the 50 to 90-year-olds, right? That someone like even myself that's gone through a little bit of it could learn from.
Have a takeaway?
I don't remember exactly what you said, but I remember you telling me about that age group, maybe not 90, but you talking to those that wish they did things a little differently. And so I don't know if there's anything that you can share that.
I think by and large, they wish they had done it sooner. I've had to do like a couple where the husband, they didn't have really anything, and the husband got dementia. And then they came to me and said, we'd like to set up a trust because the fear there is he outlives her, right? So she's managing everything for him, but they didn't have a trust so that if she died before he did and he still needed care, their kids would have to go to court to step in, all kinds of stuff. And I couldn't do a trust at that point for them as a couple because he didn't have the capacity to sign it.
Oh, wow.
So we ended up establishing a trust through the court, which I was able to do. But now she's having to provide an accounting every year of what she's spending of her own money because she has this incapacitated husband who the court had to sign for him. So it's it's expensive, not as expensive as a full-on conservatorship, but it's intrusive, and he's still alive and kicking. And
Wow.
They actually found care in Mexico.
For him?
It was half the cost of here.
And they both moved?
Nope. He's there, she's here.
Yeah.
But she's still working to pay for his care too.
Wow.
Yeah, that was an interesting one. But so yeah, she said, "Oh, so we should have came in when he still had capacity." I was like, "Yeah, that would be ideal when everybody has capacity." The other is people who have things already established, and they feel like they've got that T crossed and that I dotted, but it's been a while. So if you do have something and you're in that age group, definitely pull it out and either get a hold of the attorney who did it for you. And if they're retired, call us and get it reviewed and make sure you're up to date, because laws change like crazy and life changes. And so a lot of times I've seen people come in with trust, like we've done something, even with an attorney, but they haven't looked at it in 20 years. And now spouse has had a stroke. It's like a blended family. And, everybody's cooks are in the kitchen about decisions around health. The, spouse is fighting off that, figuring out how to pay for things. Do we pull it out of his assets or her inheritance? How does she protect her inheritance? I mean, it just gets layered.
Yeah.
Blended families, that's like a whole nother topic in and of itself. So those divorcees or widows that remarry and have two families, that's hands down, plan. If you haven't planned yet, it's too late. Just kidding, it's not. I don't want to scare you, but that can really turn into a big issue.
Yeah. Yes.
Especially health decisions, right? So like when my dad had a stroke, he'd been married 18 months. And his new wife and I, luckily, he was my dad, so I had him all worked up. Like he had everything he could possibly, it went as smooth as you could possibly imagine.
Yeah, for sure.
And it went right. And it was partly the documents, but it was also the conversations. Mm-hmm. He wanted his house, my childhood home, or my siblings and I's childhood home, to go to his new wife. And we were doing the planning. We thought, this is going to be a long time. And low key, I was like, oh, this gal's going to take care of him. Like, we don't have that problem.
Yeah.
Right? So,
you
you can have the house. Sure, totally. And I talked to it with my siblings and all of that. But just that conversation before he expressing that, my siblings and I talking about it, putting that in his trust, and it happening 18 months later, there could be this piece where the sibs are like, wait, we thought she was gonna earn it somehow. I don't know. That's a horrible way to put it.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying it real. And that really wasn't the case. We had let it go. That conversation was had. We had let it go. None of us wanted that house. We didn't need the money from that house.
Yeah.
What we wanted was everything inside that house.
Yeah.
Which we worked out in the trust too. So she left for a week. We went in there and pulled everything: dishes, silverware,
Wow.
rugs, furniture, photos, art.
Just gutted it pretty much.
Gutted it. And we still have a great relationship with her. We spend Thanksgivings, Christmases. I love her.
Oh, wow.
It's amazing. I'm so grateful he married her.
Yeah. Well, good decision on his part, and then really good communication on everyone's part.
That's what I'm saying. It's communication is at the heart of it all.
Yeah. Probate. Can you give us a little insight?
A little bit on probate.
Just a little insight on probate.
Yeah. So that's when you have a will. You either have a will or you haven't planned. You've done nothing. Then you die, and then all of your assets have to go through a court process called probate. And it's expensive. It takes roughly 18 months on average to complete a plan before people get distribution of assets. It costs roughly 5% of the gross assets. So you may have a house that's worth $1.2 million, but you owe $800,000 on it. Whatever fees that get paid, and it's paid by law, it's not negotiable to the attorney and your executor, will be based on that gross value, that 1.4, 1.2, whatever I said. Yeah. So it's expensive. $1 million gross value estate has a fee of roughly, $30,000 to $50,000 before it even gets to your kids taken out. So people generally want to avoid that.
And the best way of preventing probate
is a trust.
Mm-hmm. Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. Anything else for the audience? I want to be mindful of your time.
I think that's it.
Yeah.
Did we hit all your questions?
All 20 questions I have written out here, we hit a lot. We hit a lot of it. But I think ultimately I just wanted to, sit down with you, pick your house, just have a natural, organic discussion about things that people don't want to have a natural discussion about. I think that's what it was about. It's just whether it's trust, probate, a will, durable power of attorney, the Advanced Healthcare Directive,
guardianship for minor children.
Yeah, guardianship, and then
that'll wake you up at night as a parent.
It's true, and then the different perspectives. Whether you're in your mid 30s and you're looking up and you seeing your parents are either aging, or you hear a story like mine and they're not aging yet, but anything can happen, or you're that parent that is aging or isn't aging, and it will happen eventually. And so it's just not a topic that's discussed a lot out of fear. People want to be comfortable about, and just I think the biggest mistake people have or make is thinking that they have time, right?
They have time, or that their kids are being greedy, or it's not about being greedy. It's not about knowing the ins and outs of your parents' financial.
My thing on the greedy part is well, if you don't set something in place, then it's not going to go to your kids who are greedy. Wouldn't you want it to go to your greedy kids in the state anyways?
Anyway, that's
like, which one do you want?
Or if you have a kid that you're waiting to stop doing drugs or divorce their shitty husband or wife, or spouse, or
it's not always white or black. That's true.
I'm going to wait to do this until my family sorts themselves out. Mm-hmm. Yeah, no. That's bad. That's a bad plan.
Yeah, no, for sure. So planning, proactive as opposed to reactive. But ultimately, I always ask, where can they find you? You have a
well, we're based out of Petaluma, but we serve Sonoma and Marin County. And I think our website's BridgetMackayLaw.com.
There you go, BridgetMackayLaw.com. We'll put the website up on the screen for those that are watching.
Yeah, there's a lot of information on the website. I do a bunch of video blogs, and so
I've checked them out. I saw them. I was like, oh,
God, they're embarrassing. I never look at them after I record them.
I hate videos. I just did a video recently. Ugh.
It's the worst.
Yeah, you hear your own voice. I'm like, do I really sound like that? They're like, yep, that's exactly how you sound and look. So I get it, which is also why this podcast, when I hear it back, I'm like, ugh, to myself. But you're doing great, I promise you. But me, I'm gonna be like, oh, that's a C-. But no, I appreciate your time, and this is gonna be the third time that I publicly thank you for everything you did for me and my family. It really, really meant a lot to me. And just like you being here means a lot to me, but having a resource or someone that you can talk to that has experience is life changing. It was so it's immeasurable for me how much help you guided me through. So thank you so much.
My pleasure, Jeff. That's why I do this. I just am passionate about it, and I'll never forget. I mean, you were memorable because it was so much.
Yeah.
And you were just kind of like in shock when you left my office. I was like, gosh, I hope he's okay.
Yeah.
You know, so I was glad that it all worked out the way that it did and I could help. It's, my pleasure.
Yeah. And I was okay because of you. So thank you so much.
Aw.
And thanks for coming on the podcast. I really appreciate it. Thanks for your time.
My pleasure.
All right. Take care now.